Catholic Church through Scripture, tradition, and the Catechism. And now, your host, Jim Havens.
It is great to be back with you on The Simple Truth, where we proclaim the life-giving reality of Jesus and his Catholic Church. We consecrate everything to the Sacred Heart of Jesus through the Immaculate Heart of Mary and the pure, strong heart of Saint Joseph. It is Wholeness and Healing Monday, fighting to cultivate the health of the whole person, mind, body, and soul. With our co-host, my lovely wife, Becky Havens. She is a Catholic wife and mother with a passion and calling to educate people about the importance of caring for our bodies that the Lord has blessed us with by living a healthy lifestyle. She's the author of Toxin Free in 12 Months, a 12-month guide to help you transition over to a toxin-free lifestyle. Also wrote a boycott list of hundreds of pro-abortion companies. You can get them both for free. Learn more at her website, safehavensmama.com. Our topic today, why aren't we tolerating gluten anymore? So we're going to break that open, and always we want to give the disclaimer of what we're all about here. We're not doctors, we're not scientists, we're just regular people looking to live well and raise our family. We believe in objective truth and in asking questions when things do not make sense. We're not giving medical advice, but we do want to offer a forum here today. We know a little bit, but there's still a ton we don't know. We have personal experiences, as do you, and we would love to hear more from you as we go throughout this show today. That's why we put out the morning survey. If you haven't been a part of that morning survey and you'd like to get it, but you haven't been getting it, you can go to thestationofthecross.com, go to the Simple Truth page, scroll down, put your email address in there. But we get to as much as we can from the input that's given to us by you through the survey, but it's best to call in since we cannot read every survey response, and it's great to talk to you live on air. So we'll put the phone number out in a little bit again on this topic today. Why aren't we tolerating gluten anymore? Also, want to make mention of a special episode coming up, actually two special episodes, one tomorrow, one on Wednesday. We did have a couple people put this input in actually in the survey today, saying they'd love to hear something about Bishop Strickland being forced out. Also, another said, can we have something on the topic of obedience to authority? And so just want to let you know, we've got a special report that we're going to do tomorrow on The Simple Truth. We're going to give the whole hour over to processing the removal of Bishop Strickland. Going to bring you some great clips to help us to reflect on some things, but also the main thing is I'm going to put a survey out in the morning to get your input. I'm going to open up the phone lines for that hour, get as many people in as we can, that we can process this together. What are you thinking? What's your response? How do you make sense of this, and how does it affect the way you move forward from here? Again, processing the removal of Bishop Strickland. What can we learn? What can we understand? That all coming up tomorrow in the special report on The Simple Truth. Then on Wednesday, we've got Bishop Athanasius Schneider. Now, I conducted this interview with him. I recorded it last week, and so this was before we had the removal of Bishop Strickland from Pope Francis. So that was not a topic that we had in the conversation, as it hadn't happened yet. We really spoke a lot about his new book, Credo, and about really helping families to live the faith in our time. Great interview. That's coming up on Wednesday. And I do have a little bit from Bishop Athanasius Schneider from 2 weeks ago, actually, though, where he did talk about obedience and obedience to authority. He talked about various things that help us to kind of process things in our time, specifically related to the removal of Bishop Strickland. And in his book, Credo, he makes some important distinctions. So we're going to bring all of that again into that special report tomorrow, then that interview with Bishop Schneider on Wednesday. So stay tuned for all of that. But Becky, the topic at hand right here, right now, why aren't we tolerating gluten anymore? You pick this topic. What is it about this topic that intrigues you here?
I just feel like it's something that many people struggle with. I know I've personally dealt with a lot of issues with gluten, and not sure why, or if it's been a long-term thing. And I have many friends, many families, many children in our community and people that we know who are dealing with the same thing. And so I think it's just a great topic to kind of talk about, to put out some information out there, to learn from a lot of the survey results that we had, and just to learn more, because something is strange about it, and it's a newer development in the last 30 years, I'd say. And so, I think it's just a great topic to talk about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so let's go right to the survey. The first few questions that we asked here, yes and no questions. The first one, do you know the distinction between a gluten allergy and a gluten sensitivity or intolerance? And about 60% of the respondents said yes, they know that distinction. And then we asked, do you or does anyone in your family have a diagnosed gluten allergy of some kind? And about 40%, which is a pretty high number, said yes, that they actually do have someone in their family or themselves who has a diagnosed gluten allergy. And then we also asked, have you noticed a growing gluten intolerance in you or your family over recent years? And this was about 80% that said yes. So as far as our survey respondents go, this is a big issue that is certainly worth talking about. But when we even asked the question with respect to the topic, why aren't we tolerating gluten anymore? That does sort of presuppose that that's true, that we actually aren't tolerating gluten anymore. And then it's asking, well, why is that? So Becky, can you speak to that? If you look at the survey results, that certainly seems true from this anecdotal evidence from our crowd here, our audience, that folks are saying, yeah, we're not tolerating gluten too well anymore. And so why is that? But at scale in general, is this true that we really aren't as a whole tolerating gluten as well as we used to?
It seems to be that it is true. There's a lot of different factors into what goes into that. I know you have some of your own opinions on that you can share in a little bit. But there is some good data pointing to the fact that, our wheat has been tampered with. Our wheat is now sprayed with toxic chemicals. The process of how we make bread is different than it used to be. The process of how we make pasta is different. The main point of these larger companies who kind of took over was to create a lot of product in a shorter amount of time. And by tinkering with the food, that they're using, there have been some drastic consequences coming from that. And so I think a lot of people are struggling with that. I think how, you and I talked about before, some of it is mental. We get caught up in this new fad, like, oh, maybe I'm having issues because we're reacting to all sorts of things. It doesn't have to be wheat. It could be dairy or eggs or any kind of food we're eating. And I think that is a deeper question on why are we reacting to all these different foods. And that kind of goes into the category of, gut issues, which I'm sure everybody knows about. They've heard about it, but what does it really mean? And why is that happening? And so that is a bit of a deeper issue that we can touch upon later. But I think it's very plausible to say that we are experiencing these issues because there's been some things that have happened to our food sources that are not natural, that are not the way God intended it to be. And so now we're kind of suffering some of the consequences and we want to get back to feeling healthy again. And if we're eating food all day long, 3 times a day or more, and it's a constant issue and we're constantly having reactions, then this is a really big deal for many people that are suffering with this. So that's kind of where I stand on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great. Yeah, I don't really have a lot of hard opinions on this. It's one of the reasons I do appreciate this show every Monday is that it makes me sort of deal with topics that I ordinarily maybe wouldn't think a whole lot about. It makes me consciously kind of reflect upon them, go do a little research. What's the data say? What are other folks saying about this? What can we learn here? And so these shows are helpful to me to dig into it a little bit more personally, and then to hear what you bring to the table as well as the audience. And so hope you all enjoy these Monday episodes. If there's anything you want to bring up front here into the show today, you can call in right now. Any comment or question on this topic today, why aren't we tolerating gluten anymore? We'd love to hear from you. 1-877-511-5483. That's 1-877-511-5483. And I guess at the top, I do just want to say, by way of introduction, again, one of the reasons why topics like these are important is because, look, the end, we want to fulfill our purpose here. All right, we want to certainly be with God for all eternity in heaven. We want to raise our families well. We want to lead our families, our children, to heaven for all eternity, and anybody else. We want to lead everybody to heaven by God's grace. We want to be those lights in the world where there's so much darkness. We want to be faithful. We want to fulfill our purpose. And so in doing that, it does help if we can basically manage everything that is within our control, within reason, right? If we can understand what is within our control to help us to physically operate optimally, then we ought to understand that, and we ought to do what it takes so that we're not falling into areas that can really hamper our ability to do what we're called to do, to fulfill the responsibilities of our vocation, of our life of prayer, our life of good work, our life of mission, our life of all that we are called to do. We want to do it well, and so that it hurts your ability to do it well if you've got like chronic fatigue, right? If you're eating something and then feeling horrible after, and so what we're talking about today with this gluten sensitivity or not being able to tolerate gluten very well, this is an important aspect. If this is something that perhaps is ailing you and you're not aware of it, or perhaps maybe it might be the other direction, thinking too much about it and it's not something that's bothering you much at all. We're going to try to cover the gamut on this today, and when we get back, we are going to get into making those distinctions about what is the difference between gluten allergy, gluten sensitivity, much more. Stay tuned.
This is Franciscan Media's Saint of the Day for November 13th. Today we celebrate St. Francis Xavier Cabrini. Mother Cabrini has the distinction of being the first U.S. citizen to be canonized. Born in Italy in 1850, she desired to enter a religious congregation despite her poor health. In time, she founded her own small community, the Missionary Sisters of the Sacred Heart. Though she had long dreamt of being a missionary to China, Pope Leo XIII urged Mother Cabrini and her sisters to minister to the thousands of Italian immigrants in the United States. Difficulties and disappointments followed her at every turn. The Archbishop of New York even advised her to return to Italy, but she could not turn back. Instead, Mother Cabrini persevered, and in 35 years, she founded 67 institutions to serve the poor, the abandoned, the uneducated, and the sick. She organized schools and adult education classes for Italian immigrants to strengthen their faith. Her missionary work expanded to other U.S. cities and to Central and South America. In 1917, 10 years after becoming an American citizen, Mother Cabrini died of malaria in Chicago's Columbus Hospital, which she had founded. She was canonized in 1946. There's more about the saints along with inspiration and Catholic resources at our website, saintoftheday.org. From Franciscan Media, this has been Saint of the Day.
The Station of the Cross Catholic Media Network is dedicated to answering the critical need of access to quality, consistent, professional, and proven Catholic programming. We cannot rely on other media outlets to properly represent our church. Catholic radio reaches Catholics, non-Catholic Christians, and non-believers alike. As a nonprofit lay organization financially independent of your diocese, our apostolate is listener-supported.
Welcome back to The Simple Truth. Jim and Becky Havens here. Wholeness and Healing Monday. We're talking about this question: why aren't we tolerating gluten anymore? If you have any comment or question on it, 1-877-511-5483 is the number to call. That's 1-877-511-5483. When we ask the question in the survey, do you know the distinction between a gluten allergy, gluten sensitivity, or intolerance? This is one great response that we got. This respondent respondent said, as a person diagnosed celiac, it is very difficult to get people to understand that what a gluten-sensitive person can tolerate is not what a celiac can tolerate. Cross-contamination with gluten in the size of what can fit under a trimmed pinky fingernail is enough to make a celiac person sick for weeks or months, depending on age and other health factors, whereas someone with a gluten sensitivity will recover much quicker without any long-term effects. Do people truly understand the difference between gluten sensitivity, gluten allergy, anaphylactic, and celiac disease? There is a huge difference between all three. And so, these distinctions are very important here. Becky, anything you want to share with us on this?
Yeah, that was a great response, because I think we use all these words interchangeably and get confused as to what is what. And celiac disease is definitely different than a sensitivity. Celiac disease is literally when you're having an immune reaction to eating gluten. Another issue is thyroid disease. When you eat wheat and you have a thyroid issue, your body, the way it works is it will attack your body, thinking that the wheat is an issue, something along those lines, where many people who have thyroid disease are not able to eat wheat because it is another autoimmune response, and it can be really dangerous, even though they're not maybe testing for a gluten. A total gluten allergy. So I think it's really important to know the difference. I know for myself personally, I have a sensitivity, I guess you would call it, but not a true allergy, because I can actually eat and I'm not experiencing intense symptoms or having to go to the emergency room or anything like that. I think especially people who deal with it every day, and then they see all these people, I have to eat gluten-free, and really they don't, or they're just avoiding it because they're having issues. It probably is more of a difficult situation.
Yeah, I've got an article from this gastroenterologist from the Cleveland Clinic. Becky, I know you're always laughing at me for going to the Cleveland Clinic, but I do find it, for me, I like it as a resource to say this is a good place to begin to understand a few things and to make sense of things on a basic level. At least it gives you a starting point. And I thought this description was pretty good in terms of the distinctions, as far as I can tell. It says celiac disease. It's an autoimmune disease. Eating gluten damages your small intestine. Wheat allergy. Your immune system overreacts to wheat. It can be life-threatening. Non-celiac gluten sensitivity, NCGS, and then we can also use gluten intolerance for this, or gluten sensitivity. It's all meaning the same thing. This is when you test negative for celiac but react badly to gluten. Says that celiac disease and non-celiac gluten sensitivity, again, also called gluten intolerance or gluten sensitivity, seem similar on the surface. Both conditions can cause uncomfortable symptoms after you eat gluten, but that's where the similarities end. And so celiac disease as an immune system disorder that damages your small intestine. When you eat even a small, tiny amount of gluten, celiac also runs in families. But NCGS, this gluten sensitivity, this is a digestive disorder, not an immune system problem. And so it doesn't damage your intestine, and it doesn't run in families. It goes on. It's a pretty good article. But then when I looked up the data on the numbers, what are we really talking about here? This is what I found, at least in terms of what the National Institute of Health is reporting. They say celiac disease, this is about 2 million people in the U.S., about 1% of people worldwide. So 1 out of every 100 people worldwide with celiac disease. Wheat allergy, this would be maybe 1% max, but probably less than 1% is what the National Institute of Health is saying. And then you have this gluten sensitivity, which would be as much as 6% in the U.S. That's according to the National Institute of Health. So a lot more than celiac or wheat allergy, 6 times more, but still relatively low in a certain sense, although you can look at it in a different way and say that's pretty high. But again, this is the National Institute of Health reporting. And then this is also something to keep in mind when sorting through all of this. that gluten-free product sales in 2022 were $6.7 billion, and in 2032 estimated to be $14 billion. So there's a huge market for gluten-free products. So a cynical person might say, well, this seems like it's a money-making scheme in many respects for people that don't necessarily need those gluten-free products. But clearly, there is a great need for such products, and for people that are avoiding gluten. 1 out of 100 people with celiacs, that is something to be very much aware of, and the wheat allergy, very serious. And then that gluten sensitivity, if that's affecting 6 out of 100 people, maybe more based on other data, that's a serious thing too to keep an eye on. And so, look, there's a lot to all of this. But Becky, what do you think when you hear about the data and the numbers, the size of the market of the gluten-free product sales? Does that give you any pause, or is that just maybe a good thing, right? Like, there are people responding to this growing need out there. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, the whole thing sounds overwhelming when you just laid out all the definitions, and especially with somebody struggling with it. You the first thing is where do I start? How do I even know? Can my doctor tell me this? A lot of times, you go to the doctor and they don't have answers for you, and it's up to you to be your own advocate and to start a food diary or a food journal and start removing different things out of your diet that you think might be triggering these reactions. So I've been there personally, and that's really difficult. So even just hearing all those definitions, you kind of might think, I don't even know where to start. So that would be a good place to start, is talking to a doctor or a naturopath and kind of working out what you're even dealing with. Because if you have a severe allergy, that's going to look really different than some kind of sensitivity or intolerance. And I will say, my numbers were a little bit higher in the research that I did. I had all the way up to 30%. The gluten intolerance has gone. But then one of the National Library of Medicines reported that over the last 20 to 50 years, the rate of celiac disease has gone from, like you said, it's 1 in 100, but it used to be 1 in 1,000. So that's a huge jump for people to be having that over, 20 to 50 years. What's going on? As far as the gluten-free industry, I think that whenever there's money to be made and these are big companies, they're going to jump on the bandwagon. I don't think that gluten-free eating and boxed processed food is the way to go. I've definitely done that myself. I still do that sometimes. I think you're going to be lacking a lot of nutrients. I think actually the best thing to do is just to avoid all box products like we were talking about earlier, and avoid kind of any grains for a while, and just stick to really simple food, like how you were saying, meat and veggies, maybe a few grains that are properly prepared here and there. But people don't want to give that up. People don't want to give up their box cake, and I don't blame them. It's good, but they're making a killing on these things. Are they healthier? No, I guarantee you these grains that they're using in here are still sprayed with Roundup, and you're still getting as much as sugar as you were in the other products, and it's still being processed. And now you're going to run into other issues, but you think you're in the clear because it doesn't have wheat or gluten in it. But I don't think it's necessarily, figuring out the issue at hand. So I think that those are really big numbers to say that the gluten-free industry is going to go up that high in about 10 years. So that's kind of alarming in my mind. Yeah.
Yeah, and you're referring to a conversation that we had off the air earlier today about this, where when I kind of am thinking about all of this and try to put it in simple terms, I think, well, it doesn't make sense to just be eating all of these gluten-free products. As much as I enjoy a gluten-free cookie, there are some gluten-free cookies that I think are more phenomenal than any cookie with the gluten in it. I think there are some great things out there with almond flour and various things. That's kind of defeating the purpose of good health. It's not just gluten that is a problem. Sugar, I would say, for many people that might have gluten sensitivity, they probably have sensitivity to sugar just in terms of general bad health, regardless if you're eating a bunch of sugar or if you're eating a bunch of dairy. There's a lot of sensitivity there. So to me, it's like, just to be safe and sure, I mean, what if you just stuck to a basic diet and just said, I'm going to eat meat, I'm going to eat vegetables, I'm going to make fruits my dessert, and I'm just going to keep it like that, pretty natural, pretty simple. It seems to me that we probably would all operate a bit better on that sort of a protocol, and just forget about all the processed stuff. Look, I love chips, but I don't know that there's any health advantage at all to eating chips at any time of any nature. I think it's something that we might enjoy, but probably something that we could do without for our health. But Becky, any thoughts on just diet in general, and not just a short-term diet, but a change in diet in terms of lifestyle throughout your life?
Yeah, I think that's where we need to go. I think we live in a world that is just throwing advertisements out at us. The perfect American picnic is like hamburgers and hot dogs, with chips and mayonnaise and potato salad, macaroni salad. I mean, it's like it's really sad. Like this is what we connect these fun holidays with, is food, and it's all junk food. It might taste good, but I don't think it's creating a healthy environment in our bodies at all. But that's what we're used to, and that's what's being thrown out at us. And so we just continue on. I think it's breaking this cycle. And look, it's really hard for me to do something like that. And especially the issue, I think, for many people is time. So when you prepare your own foods, when you prepare your own breads, we're doing a little bit of that at home. I mean, it takes like 12 to 16 hours to properly prepare a loaf of bread. I mean, we're not used to that. That's not something that's been handed down from generation to generation at this point. I think it's coming back, and people are trying to learn, because there's so many issues with the food that we're eating. And so we're like, we have no choice, but you have to take the time out, and people's lives are extremely busy. And, kids in school, it's like, what are you getting for lunch? You're getting like a bologna sandwich or a ham sandwich. Half the time it might be going in the garbage can because it's gross, so that's where we're at.
Man, I still remember a little kid, and then one time I think I had liverwurst, and I was like, what is this? I didn't even know what it was. I just knew this thing does not smell right, taste right. I went right into the garbage. I remember that. But yeah, no, there's a lot to it all to consider. But again, when we try to get back to what is simple, what we know already, I think we can figure this stuff out. It's just hard to do, right? It's hard to commit to saying, I'm going to make these changes in my life, and I'm going to have the discipline to stick to it. Usually we're on a roller coaster of kind of like, okay, I'm starting to do well with some good habits. Now I'm feeling good. And when I'm feeling good, I'm like, okay, well, I think I can eat some chips again. I think I can eat some of this again, more bread, more pasta. And then before you know it, you're feeling terrible again. And then the cycle just keeps going. We're going to be right back with much more. Stay tuned.
This is Life News Radio. I'm Jim Anderson. Students for Life of America has uncovered incredibly helpful data with exit polling during Tuesday's election in Ohio, where voters shackled state powers to regulate abortion or gender therapies. A third of yes voters do not support unlimited abortion, but favor abortion bans with very limited exceptions. They believed the ads favoring issue 1 and were unaware of its conflict with what they believe. 60% of Ohio voters oppose all or most abortions. Italy has made an 8-month-old girl in the UK an Italian citizen so she can get free care in Rome for a deadly mitochondrial disorder. UK doctors instead want to terminate life support. Prayers are requested as a final last-ditch court hearing is Friday for Indy Gregory. This is Life News Radio. The Pennsylvania Houck family, including children, not only suffered a highly weaponized dawn raid of their home, the family's sense of loss keeps going on. Ryan Marie Houck has suffered 3 miscarriages, which she says in court documents is connected to the violent FBI raid, arrest, and the empty prosecution of her husband. They have now filed multi-million-dollar claims in court against the Department of Justice. A British Army vet is facing charges for silent prayer thought crimes. Upon questioning, he admitted he was praying for his dead son lost to an abortion. Adam Smith was cited for thinking about his son near an abortion clinic. And Iowa wants its heartbeat abortion law back after a lower court blocked its enforcement. State's attorneys tell Iowa's Supreme Court that the U.S. Supreme Court Dobbs v. Jackson ruling allows laws like Iowa's heartbeat abortion ban, sought by citizens and passed by state legislators. For pro-life headlines delivered to your email address daily, sign up at lifenews.com. This has been Life News Radio.
Welcome back to The Simple Truth. Jim and Becky Havens here, Wholeness and Healing Monday, talking about the question, why aren't we tolerating gluten anymore? If you want to get in on the conversation, anything to share, any question to ask, 1-877-511-5483. That's 1-877-511-5483. Becky, we did ask folks in the survey if they have made any changes and if they've seen any good results related to having any gluten sensitivities or anything along those lines. And this is what we had reported back to us. One said, stomach pain when I eat more than 2 slices of bread per day. I am also very careful with pasta. Another said, I do not have a problem with gluten, but I have been gluten-free for over 5 years because of all the chemicals they spray on wheat. Another said gluten-free products seem to help. Another said, I'm considering trying a week or 2 of gluten-free to see how it affects me. Another said, I eat absolutely no grains, no wheat, no corn, no oats, no rice, none. I feel so much better. My digestive issues are greatly improved. Bloating is gone as well. And then Sharon in Raleigh, North Carolina said that she's been on a gluten-free diet for over 25 years and that it's reversed her iron deficiency anemia and other symptoms. Thank you for all of those responses. Becky, anything further you'd like to share about possible changes that can be made and good results?
Yeah, those are great responses. I think the key is finding something that works and sticking to it. Like you were saying before the break, that you go through these cycles where you eliminate foods and you feel good, and then you're like falling into the old habits again. It's really easy to do. And so you have to, just like any other serious habit that you implement into your life, this has to be the same. So it takes discipline, something that we are lacking. Probably most people are lacking. So it's very difficult. But I would say that just the comments that I'm hearing is motivating to kind of get myself personally to get back and really to make some better decisions. Time is an issue, but you can always find quick ways to make healthy food, so that was good motivation for me.
Yes, the phone lines are open if you want to call in and join us. Any comment, question, why aren't we tolerating gluten anymore? 1-877-511-5483. That's 1-877-511-5483. We also asked, do you have any further thoughts on why people are more sensitive to gluten than they used to be? Here were some responses. One, possibly chemicals used in growing wheat. Another said chemicals used in growing and processing food products. Another said glyphosates. I'm not really sure what that is. Maybe Becky, you can explain that. And then another said partially a greater awareness. It took 7 years for my celiac to be diagnosed. Not sure if the increase of over-processed food is contributing to this. Becky, anything further on this? And if you know what glyphosates are, I'm not sure what that is.
It is glyphosate.
Well, then it was spelled wrong. That wasn't on me.
That's okay. That is the main ingredient in Roundup, which is the chemical that is sprayed on all conventional wheat here in the United States. There's some stricter laws over in Europe and Asia. I've heard people say that they can eat anything over there, but they do still spray it a little bit. And then you have the carryover. So some fields are sprayed with it, and you're getting residual sprays into the non-sprayed crops, if that makes sense. And so therefore you can cross-contaminate, and it gets on everything. And I almost feel like that's what it's made to do. Glyphosate is in itself like a totally toxic ingredient in these fertilizers. And even though there's been billions of dollars that was settled on different cases of injury and whatever against Monsanto, they still continue to sell it. It's still allowed to be used here in the United States, which is just crazy. And I know that it's used because that's how they're making money. You know what I mean? So that they've actually made it so that these crops are resistant to bugs. So like they made it on purpose. And I know you have a great comment that you might bring up in a little while, so I'll save that part for later. But yeah, I can't remember where my point was going, because as soon as I hear glyphosate, I get so irritated because that's a huge part of where we're going. So let me just share this really quick before I send it back to you. But these are just some of the things that when people are consuming glyphosate, these are actually studies are showing this, that people are getting non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, DNA and chromosomal damage, ADHD, Alzheimer's, autism, birth defects, various forms of cancer, celiac disease, colitis, heart disease, infertility, IBS, kidney disease, liver disease, and Parkinson's disease. So that's like data, raw data they have on what is actually happening to humans. And yet it's still being sold. It's still in our wheat. And it's not even just in our wheat. It's probably in all the grains, gluten-free or not. So it's a big issue.
Yes, yeah, we did get a call that just came in. Linda from Niagara Falls, thanks for calling in. She's not on the line, but she did leave a question, which reads as follows. My son was diagnosed with celiac. The rest of the family are now also eating gluten-free. Will we grow an intolerance to gluten because we are keeping a gluten-free diet? Becky, your thoughts?
I wouldn't necessarily say that, because I know a lot of people who actively work to heal their gut is really where it stems from. And then they are able to go through and eventually introduce wheat back into their diet. But it really should be wheat that's properly prepared, which would be sourdough, because sourdough actually can reach gluten-free levels at 48-hour mark. So that's a lot of fermentation for a loaf of bread. Some people do the long sourdough, and you're actually getting almost totally gluten-free bread. It's sour, but that's one way to do it. I know somebody personally who really struggled with these sensitivities and was able to work on her gut, and she followed something called the GAPS diet, GAPS diet, and was able to slowly introduce properly prepared grains and wheats, and she tolerates it just fine. So I think if you're bringing in the wheat that is tampered with and has all the yucky chemicals on it, then you might still continue to have issues. But I think that if you do it properly, you're definitely able to probably bring it back in at some point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think we're eventually going to do a show on that GAPS diet at some point, dig into that a little bit more deeper. But also, I think if I'm reading this question right, and it's hard to tell when it's not, when we don't have the caller there to ask it. Not sure if we're getting this right, but I think what she's asking is saying that since the son is diagnosed with celiac, and now we're all avoiding gluten-free as an entire family, even though really only he needs to, are we going to grow an intolerance to the gluten because we're not eating it? Basically, if you avoid gluten, do you then grow an intolerance to it? And I'll just say, I'm going to go back to my Cleveland Clinic article. And so they do say that there is some, this is where I actually part with the Cleveland Clinic. And I think I'm smart enough, a little bit of smarts here to read through a couple different things. And this is where I think I part ways with them on this part of it a little bit. When they're talking about, is a gluten-free diet healthier? But first, just to ease ease the caller's mind, they do not list that. They do say that there are some things you need to watch out for when you're eating gluten-free, but they don't say anything about growing an intolerance because you're avoiding gluten. So you'd have to dig deeper, I guess, on that to get a fair answer to it. But they don't mention anything to that here. So I guess it wouldn't be a prominent thing to worry about. But they do say this: if you go gluten-free without a medical reason, you risk inaccurate blood tests for celiac disease and the gluten sensitivity if you need testing later. They're basically just saying if you take it out and then you go for the testing, the tests aren't going to really be able to tell. You need to be eating it for the tests to work. Okay, fair enough. Then they say, though, that you have to watch for a low fiber intake, which is necessary for healthy digestion. But I would say, look, as long as you're eating vegetables, plenty of vegetables, then I don't think your fiber intake would be much of an issue just by cutting out gluten and cutting out various grains. But something to be aware of, I guess. You want to make sure you're eating those vegetables that are high in fiber. Also, though, they say vitamin or mineral deficiencies you need to watch out for, because gluten-free products aren't required to be enriched like gluten products are. Gluten-containing grains are enriched with essential nutrients like B vitamins and iron. Again, I'm not so sure that that's a great thing. Becky, what do you think about that? Them saying that you kind of need these gluten-containing grains that are enriched with B vitamins and iron. Again, if you're eating the vegetables as a trade-off here, I think you're going to be better off. Becky, your thoughts?
Yeah, for sure. They started doing that. They did the same with putting the iodine in the salt, because they feel like people can't supplement themselves. They feel like people can't take responsibility and eat a healthy diet. So we're just going to add it to the cereal. We're just going to add it to the formula, because we don't really want to. And this goes back to even like breastfeeding. So they started to say that breastfeeding wasn't essential, although that's where most kids are starting off with a great bacteria in their bellies, and then from there they're getting all the essential nutrients and vitamins that they need. But instead they were pushing the formula. Well, we have all this fortified stuff and this is going to be better for them. And then we're going to put in the cereal, actually. So as they grow up, then they're going to continue to get those vitamins and minerals. And now they're realizing, well, actually, I don't know if they're realizing, but we're realizing that those type of vitamins that they use, we can't really absorb them. They're not the proper form of the vitamins. And we don't want those. We don't want that folic acid, especially if you're dealing with the MTHFR mutation. And so actually, if you have that, totally avoid enriched grains. That's not a good thing. It's like they want total control over now your vitamins, as if they know better, when really, like as you were saying, if we just stick to what God has given us in our food, then I think he's got it all taken care of. I think he covers the bases of what we need, and we're not needing these enriched products in order to get our daily B vitamins. It doesn't add up. So I think you're right.
Mm-hmm. And if you don't know what that MTHFR is all about, we did a whole show on it. You can go back and find that. But this was from Michelle in Andover, New Hampshire. She says that 3 of the 8 of us have celiac. At the moment, they're doing a gluten challenge to test 4 of the remaining kids. And she writes, it's my understanding that in order for wheat to be a sustainable crop here in the U.S., it actually needs to have a higher gluten content than wheat grown over in Europe. Add to that all of the overuse of it in every facet of the human diet, the removal of beneficial nutrients during the processing phase only to be added back in unnaturally, the lack of appropriate nutrients in the ground, and the overuse of pesticides. It's a wonder anyone can really tolerate gluten in any form anymore. Thank you for your response. Great response there, Michelle in Andover, New Hampshire. Becky, your thoughts?
Yeah, that's exactly something that I 100% agree on. I think she addresses everything, and I think she's right. It amazes me that people can eat as much gluten as they do. I know when I was struggling with that myself, I'm like, how is everyone else tolerating this? But I'm like dying from eating like a few pieces of bread at some point, like my system was completely overloaded, and it was just like, you need to just stop for a while. And once I did and just eliminated it all out of my body, I started to feel so much better. And who knows what the cause of it was. I don't know, something was triggered, or, it was right after a pregnancy for me. And who knows? But I completely agree with everything that she said.
Yeah, I know we both, Becky, you and I, we both have some Italian background in our families. We love the, there's a whole culture around the Sunday sauce, eating the pasta. I mean, there's so much that is so good surrounding all of that. But you wonder, even thinking back when you were a kid, around the family, everybody eating these big bowls of pasta and all that was going on there. Was everybody just feeling terrible after, feeling sick, but not saying anything? Everybody just kind of, for lack of no pun intended, gutting it out, but basically being quiet about it. Everybody's just gonna, be tough about the suffering afterwards and not say anything. Is that what's going on there? I mean, I don't know. Becky, your thoughts before we hit the break.
Yeah, I know for me, I was like struggling big time as a kid. I used to really hate the way I felt after eating sauce, but that was it. That's what you did. So this could go back, like way back for me personally, but yeah, I don't know. I think it's a good question to ask our parents.
Yeah. We'll be right back. Stay tuned.
Please join us in a prayer to our guardian angel. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen. O holy guardian angel, take care of our soul and body. Enlighten our mind that we may know the Lord better and love him with all our heart. Help us in our prayers so that we may not give in to distractions. Assist us with your advice so that we may see the good and carry it out with generosity. Defend us from the insidious snares of the enemy and sustain us in temptations that we may always be victorious. Remedy our coldness in our worship of the Lord. Cease not to protect us until you have brought us into paradise, where we will praise our good God together for all eternity. Amen.
Hear a powerful sermon you need to share with a loved one? Maybe there's a guest, prayer, or teaching segment that deserves another listen. You can listen to any of our network-produced programs at your convenience by finding us wherever you enjoy podcasts: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Podbean, and the free iCatholic Radio app. Be uplifted in your faith. Listen today at thestationofthecross.com or on your favorite podcasting platform.
This is Jesuit Father Robert McTigg, yearly host of the Catholic Current. Join me on Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern to welcome back Sarah Kane, better known as the Crusader Gal. We'll be talking about endangering women for the sake of inclusion. Have we lost our minds? What do we need to do to recover our sanity? Don't miss out. Join us on the Catholic Current on Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern, coming to you from the Station of the Cross and the iCatholic Radio mobile app.
Wholeness and Healing Monday here on The Simple Truth. Jim and Becky Havens here talking about why aren't we tolerating gluten anymore. If you want to get a call in, last chance to do so, 1-877-511-5483. That's 1-877-511-5483. Also, want to mention that Becky's got some great free resources for you over at her website, safehavensmama.com. That's safehavensmama.com. All right, we got quite a response here from Jeff, who is a gluten-free food manufacturer in Michigan. He wrote the following. He said that while doing research on this subject around 2008, I happened upon the unsecured section of the high-level area of the Monsanto Executive Mail Portal. I read the conversation between several executives of Monsanto regarding the genetic modification of wheat back in the 70s. However, the primary focus was upon their then current work on the genetic modification of corn and future modifications of corn. Regarding genetic modification of the wheat supply in the 70s, A Monsanto executive outlined a summary of the modification as such. Initially, Monsanto's genetic modification work centered upon modifying wheat so it could produce greater yield per acre, as I thought that being an admirable quest. But then later modifications, I started to notice that it turned dark. The focus, as they recorded, shifted to wanting to develop a strain of wheat that was more disease resistant. Maybe admirable, but now their focus was on attacking an organism, a harmful organism, but nevertheless an organism. As an expansion of this activity, they then wanted to make it insect resistant, making it disease resistant, move their activity so that it was unintentionally closer to having a potential impact on humans. Making it insect resistant definitely would impact humans. How they made it insect resistant was by modifying the wheat so that it would attack the digestive system of the insect, basically destroying it so that the insects would basically starve to death, eliminating the cause of the problem and future generations. The way it affected the insects provided the genetic coding to affect humans. The wheat genetic modification coding can't distinguish between disease, insect, or human. It attacks the digestive system. So that's from Jeff, a gluten-free manufacturer in Michigan. He said he was sad he didn't record all of this, taking the data, because when he went to go back in, he was blocked out of it, apparently. So yeah, quite a report here from Jeff. Becky, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, that's some pretty serious information there. So that's crazy. I mean, I would say everything checks out. All the research I've done, that sounds exactly what we've heard from different reports and such. So yeah, I wish he would have saved that information too. He could have maybe, I mean, but these guys are huge, so they probably do anything to shut people up. But that makes sense. If they are creating something that's going to destroy an organism or an insect's gut bacteria, of course that's going to affect the humans that are eating it. So they must know this, and the fact that they're continuing on to do it is scary, and it makes you think, like, we should do everything we can to make sure we're not ingesting that,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, here's another, some comments we got from Matt in Elizabeth, Colorado. He said, none of this applies to my family, but I would think that, some of the reasons why maybe this applies to others would be poor diet and exercise, rest, lack of rest in general, or possibly a narcissistic mess like the trans and other issues, people claiming allergies for attention. And then he says, do you find it as funny as I do when people who won't eat pasta or bread because of some severe gluten allergy then eat something else in front of you packed with gluten and seem perfectly fine? So I think Matt may be in the more cynical camp on all of this. But to his point, that can be true, right? That we can say, I have a gluten sensitivity, and then avoid various things, but then again, we're eating a gluten-free cookie or cake packed with sugar. It doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense. Becky, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think, when it actually came to mind earlier when you were naming all the different gluten sensitivities, if you actually go and look through them, they have like 5 or 6 of them, and it's confusing. And I was like, this does sound like the trans stuff that's going on. I personally don't think it's the same, because I know personally that I've experienced some of that, some of the issues from wheat. But at the same time, I probably, did get caught up in all of it and think at some point, like, this is the reason for all of my difficulties. You know what I mean? It must be gluten, and if I get rid of it, I'm going to feel better. And I really only probably felt better because at the same time I was eliminating gluten, I believe we were eliminating dairy and all sorts of grains, and eating more whole foods. So that makes sense, so you don't exactly know what's triggering. I don't know if you'll ever know the full reason of what triggers these responses in everybody. I'll say one theory from this guy known as the nutrition genome. His theory is that it's a mix of things, that it's antibiotics, NSAIDs, which is anti-inflammatory medications like aspirin, Motrin, and Advil, sugar, and glyphosate all together. They share the common theme that they disrupt gut bacteria and increase the risk of gut permeability. Once gut permeability occurs, food allergies rise along with other health disorders, and especially inflammation. And I know that there is a connection to celiac disease and type 2 diabetes. And so that makes me think, yeah, there might be an insulin issue or a sugar issue there as well. I think it was a study that said like over in the Middle East, the celiac disease was like 6% of people, which I thought was really interesting. And that was the large connection they were seeing to what did I just say? I totally lost my train of thought because I'm reading here.
That's all right. That's all right. I don't know exactly where you were heading, but you got something?
I said you must not have been listening if it was.
I was, but I'm listening so well that I was so into it.
Yeah, right. Type 2 diabetes. I'm sorry, total blank of mine. That happens sometimes when you're on a show. But the type 2 diabetes, yeah, sorry about that. All right, you go ahead and share your response.
No, and now I totally forgot anything that I was going to say. But I do want to go to one question that we did have that came in. We had a few questions come in. I think we're only probably going to be able to get to this one, but it is as follows. Holy Communion for a Catholic with celiac or a true gluten allergy can be done by requesting a low gluten host. I believe that particular host is made with 10 ppm of wheat, so it can still be properly transubstantiated into the body and blood of Jesus Christ. Does everyone know that this is available to them by request through their parish or diocese? And I would say you can go to the USCCB website. They do talk about celiac disease. I don't think they understand necessarily the distinction with the wheat allergy, which is even more serious. But they do say that every parish does need to make these concessions available, make these ways available. And so there's various ways that they can do this. A low gluten host is one way, and then there are other ways as well. So there's a bunch there on the USCCB website, or you can search that out. But know that yeah, certainly is a possibility. And this is what I did want to say, Becky, of what you were saying before, is that what we're really looking for here, and I think we're touching on it with this topic, is we want to have a healthy gut, right? We want to have a healthy gut biome, I believe is the way that you say it. And so that's a whole nother thing, right? And to say, like, what is the vision for how we're supposed to be operating with a healthy gut? And this is more than just the stomach, right? This is a bigger issue than all of that, but there are various things that are contributing to an unhealthy gut or an unbalanced gut biome. So this is something that certainly would be good for us to do an entire episode on coming up soon. But yeah, a lot to dive into. We want to feel well, reasonably so, to be going about our good work, loving our families, doing all that we are called to do. We don't want to be dragging unnecessarily. Yeah, we got to pick up the cross and make all those sacrifices that we're called to make, but why make it harder on ourselves than it needs to be? Having some understanding, some discipline around some wisdom here is going to help us a long way. God bless you all.
Come to the St. Thomas More House of Prayer and discover the prayer that will